At least the feature's still there.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours on this late April day. And small group today, but welcome, everyone. So I guess just to jump in, I think maybe the only real announcement I've got this week is that we decided to ship 4.8.0 after all, and we have declared it stable. This was instigated, I guess, by a fairly major bug in the events subsystem. I think maybe someone in the community found it, and Teddy ended up fixing it. So Teddy argued that we should cut a 4.0 because it was a pretty annoying bug for people. So we did. Other than that, I think our general assumption is we should be working towards 5.0 based on the packaging and code signing stuff. And that's the next sort of real release. 4.8.0 is a little bit more of a point release that we just felt like we had to get out the door. So probably next section, maybe questions, issues, PRs, especially from the community. I don't see anyone from the community here, so other than like kind of the core people. So I guess I'll still pause a moment. But moving on to PRs that people want to talk about. I'm going to shuffle the packaging one down into packaging workflow. I don't think we need this up here. So Stefano, it looks like you put up an improvement for TLS blueprint.
Yeah. If you remember last office hours, I mentioned that I was investigating some enrollment failure issues. So it was Osquery was retrying. Osquery was trying too many times to do enrollment, and also it wasn't exactly clear how the flag TLS enroll max attempts worked. I've also mentioned that there is a desire of having Osquery do infinite retries instead of exiting, and this particularly also happened only at the start at Osquery startup. So this blueprint is a bit longer explanation in what I would like to do and why. And specifically, well, for a summary is that I don't think, as it currently stands, that the flag TLS enroll max attempts models correctly what I think it means and what we want out of it, which ideally it is made to reduce the amount of attempts Osquery does against an endpoint to try enrollment. And this is, I'm saying it's not modeling it correctly because currently it has mainly two very different behaviors depending of when the enrollment happens, and if it is on the startup or later when maybe the backend, the endpoint tells Osquery that the node key is invalid, and so Osquery has to re-enroll. And also that second case, the behavior depends on which plugin did the request originally against the backend endpoint. So basically, to simplify all this, since we really want to have, since enrollment is a required functionality for TLS logger, TLS config, and it's basically a blocking functionality, I think it makes it is better to have a flag that only lets you set a maximum interval for the quadratic backoff it currently has. So basically, there's no more attempts. Osquery tries indefinitely to enroll. Every time it fails, there's a sleep, an increasingly long sleep with, again, a quadratic backoff up to a maximum interval. Proposed default currently is like 5 minutes. And there are other details inside the blueprint that, but yeah.
Do you want to talk about it a little bit here, or do you want to talk about it in the blueprint? Both?
Well, I mean, I don't want to take all the time, but another details I want to say. So beyond the fact that TLS, the current flag behaves differently depending on if it's on the startup or if it's later during re-enrollment, we said that, and we had this knowledge that on startup, if the TLS enrollment fails up to the configured amount of attempts, Osquery exits. Now, there's also a bug which the number of attempts is doubled. But the fact that it exits, it's not strictly connected to that flag. So it's not because the user has set that flag to some value that Osquery exits. Osquery exits because there's a plugin that fails to enable to being set up successfully. So, I mean, it's not intended, basically. It just so happens that it fails to initialize properly, and so Osquery exits. And so there are all these little things that makes it confusing, and also not doing, mostly being not have unexpected behavior.
It sounds really confusing. I remember we talked a little bit about it last time, so I'm glad you're sort of trying to tackle it and stare at all the pieces. I think we do want some kind of exit on failure semantics, because if I think about like running servers, or if I think about servers, like I actually kind of want software to stop if it's not working. Like I want to know it's broken. I want it to be like, hey, I can't do the thing you told me to do. I'm just going to exit. So that's like a common theme for stuff that I want. You know, I'm a little bit leery of, oh, Osquery is running, and to a simple PS check, it looks like it's running okay. It's got a legit looking uptime, but it's not actually talking to the server. It doesn't have a valid config. So there's like I think it's worth having it exit, but I mean, I think you're right that everything you mentioned sounds like a mess that needs to be rethought. So, I wonder if there's actually, given that you've identified several use cases, I wonder if there are actually like 3 different parameters, and this is trying to do double duty on all of them, right? Like one of them is max initial enroll attempts, right? If Osquery can't enroll, then it should probably just not start up. Like that is a failure of the configuration subsystem, right? Or the TLS subsystem or some plugin, right? So that's legit. There should be like a only try so much, and then it's a failure, and bail out and hope someone's monitoring for that error. And then it's probably reasonable to adjust the max timeout time, right? And then there's this other one of re-enrollment is effectively infinite. So maybe we don't want a parameter there at all, right? It's just like, yeah, it's going to keep trying to do the re-enrollment with the new backoff time parameter and logging about it, right? And the whole time it's re-enrolling, I guess I don't know what I want it to do, actually. Maybe it should exit. I don't really know.
Yeah, well, disclaimer, we do have a customer, but this is not actually the first time we have heard about it, but a customer that would like to have Osquery not exit on startup and have it infinitely retry. And I understand the fact that you say Osquery, you don't know what Osquery is doing, though you are, well, technically you are seeing it trying to enroll. On the other hand, sure, you don't have, yeah.
One, I'd support setting these parameters to 0 for infinite. Right, like that seems reasonable to me. But if I thought about monitoring something, right, like So if I thought about a massive Osquery install, right, one thing I might do is I might have on this on my TLS aggregator side, right, like who haven't I seen logs from? And then I don't really care what's going on the client side. I'll always know because my server is like, hey, I haven't seen logs from Seth. What's up? But that can be hard to track. So a thing you might often do is just, on the client side, right, are the daemons I expect up is Osquery running? And that might be good enough or might not. And, something like systemd is just going to restart it for you. But as a sysadmin, I expect to be monitoring for, general systemd failures, right? Like if systemd is like, hey, I'm restarting this every hour, then I feel like I should know about that. So I don't know. I feel like one of the things that's really just been a scourge is programs that don't die, right? Programs that are like, well, I'm broken, but I'm still just going to pretend to be up. So I really don't want to build that.
Well, Stefano, for your customer who wants to have Osquery not exit in this case, like what's their motivation for that versus doing more like what Seth's describing, where the service system restarts it after it fails?
Yeah, I have to clarify that part. It's true they don't want to see Osquery just disappear from their fleet, and probably they do what I was saying, which is they see it trying enrollment, so they know it's there and it's not dead. But also, I mean, I see both points. I will try to understand more from this customer, but also I don't fully consider Osquery to be broken if if it fails to enroll. Like it depends. It would depend on the failure itself. So if it is a backend not responding, I mean, sure, you could have given a wrong configuration for the endpoint, but yeah, I don't know. It seems. So just to clarify, I mean, my intention was between all the other things was also to simplify it, because it's true that we can give add new flags and give each flag their own use. And with this specific case, I am a bit more wary of adding them and giving them all those different meanings. And actually in the blueprint, there's also an alternative implementation where I do mention that we could use the zero value, and we can also use the concept of a pool inside the enroll plugin, so that you only have that specific number of attempts. And even if there is another place of the code that tries to retrieve the node key and it is missing, the attempts are finished and it cannot do anything else. But then we have the special case for enrollment, where you have to reset the pool every time the plugin does a new request, if we want to keep that behavior. So, I mean, the commonality in there, since we are already doing an infinite retry with the re-enrollment, was to say why we shouldn't do it for every case, basically. Because what's different at this point from startup to re-enrollment?
On re-enrollment, you might have a cached config, so you can kind of guess your config is good, which means you can buffer logs, right? Like if you're meant to buffer logs, you'll have that setting. Yeah. Counterpoint, though, is that maybe that's bullshit, and like the thing that the server was saying is go away forever, or like, oh, I've got a new totally different config. So I don't know. I'm not real sure. I might have to think about it, and maybe we should all think about it and just talk in the blueprint or something.
Well, and one other thing that comes up for me is if, say, the enrollment, if they're using a file system config plugin or something from some extension, a non-TLS config plugin, and so they're able to load their configs, and they're using a non-TLS logging plugin. So they're able to send logs, and the only thing they're trying to do with the enrollment is to be able to enable live queries. Then I could see maybe allowing Osquery to start up and run with no live query support. But I think my concern would be that there's no way to tell that Osquery is stuck in this no config state.
I'd also mention, like, having configured many servers and many daemons on many servers across a lifetime, the number of times that people typo the host name, and end up with some unreachable server or client embedded in a config that, is either sitting there being like, waiting to contact host, and no one ever notices it's broken for like a month. More often than you think. So it's very hard as a client to determine if this is a fatal error or a transient error. I don't actually think you can. I don't think a TCP client can tell the difference.
So I guess that we can take this tentatively. So as I said, in the blueprint, there is the alternative implementation, which actually I initially thought about, that where 0 is currently unused, or actually works like disabling enrollment, although the plugin is called. Yeah, because they represent the total attempts you can do. Yeah. So we can repurpose it for Infinite and use that pool behavior, so that if you still want the old behavior, you just keep everything like default. Although, to be fair, it has been also asked that the infinite retries is the default instead of having the 3 retries we have right now. So, yeah.
I would probably not make infinite the default, but I would certainly support upping the default to being like 20 or something more than 3.
I see.
I don't know. We talked about it in the issue, I think. So I feel like I want to chew on this.
Yeah.
Teddy in absentia asked for code review on his log rotate PR, which is 7015. So if anyone's up for reviewing that, that'd be good. The C++ was a little bit too much for me to feel like I could get a good handle on. Feature seems fine though, so if anyone's up for that. Other stuff I shoved down into agenda, but I don't know if anyone has any other simple questions, issues, PRs. Okay. Next agenda item is the new packaging workflow, which maybe we can merge. Can we just merge 7059 now? Where are we with that?
I think it is ready on my end. I would like to see some kind of, maybe as a submodule, not sure yet, a way to tie the correct Osquery repository with the correct Osquery packaging commit. But otherwise, it should be ready.
Do you feel like we need to block 7059 on that, or can that be subsequent work?
I think we can do it with a new pull request.
So we need to tie the Osquery version, Osquery repo version to the packaging repo version?
Yeah, so that we know the packaging code we use is compatible with the artifacts we have in Osquery.
I think we probably need to, I don't know, let's talk about, I feel like a submodule doesn't feel quite right, because you might not want the Osquery code to, you might not want a pull request to basically be able to monkey that. And I feel like, so the use case here is probably like, how do I build and package something 2 versions ago, right? It shouldn't really be about packaging off head.
With the submodule, you are still allowed to use a different version, but by default, we would use compatible packaging code.
Are you thinking about using this in the CI and automation flows, or in sort of like if a human is doing the checkouts and building on their local workstation?
I would say both. So right now, the Osquery repository just installs the artifacts in a folder and also generate the tarball containing the package data. But then we will have to use the Osquery packaging code to actually generate the final packages to ship. So there is some collaboration happening between Osquery and Osquery packaging.
Yeah, something feels kind of weird and backwards to me, because I can imagine, right? Let's say we discover there's some settings in the MSI we need to tweak or something, right? So we go and we update the packaging code. This is compatible with everything, but we can't. Nothing will use it until we then PR something into the Osquery repository, which might be correct, but also feels like it sort of blurs these concerns again, which you're like, the whole point of this is to separate the concerns a little bit.
Well, not really. The main goal here was to have more control and better know what we are running inside the Osquery code sign workflow. So the main goal was to not build the full Osquery directly inside the protected environment where we send things. But yeah, usually when we break things apart into multiple repositories, we still have to tie things together in a way that makes the build reproducible. Otherwise, the CI will be subject to failures depending on where and when the workflow is run.
Yeah. Yeah, something still just feels a little weird to me, but I might just be wrong. I don't know. Anyone else have thoughts about this? Okay. Well, maybe we should just merge 7059, and then we can keep talking about how to do this best. I can kind of make up some stories where, like, CI is mostly going to be building on off head, or, you know, head minus 1 or 2, right? Because we're mostly building releases. So I could almost imagine some semvar-ish stuff where the packaging repo declares what versions of Osquery it can build. I guess what I'm circling around is, like, what is authoritative? Like, what is the source of truth for what should be used? Is it the packaging repo, which is a little bit more protected, or is it the Osquery repo?
Ideally, Osquery's concern is to ship whatever artifact we have in there, always, in this special exchange format we have, which is just that flat archive.
Yeah,
then
so
the packaging code has
well,
to be.
Sorry, I'd say I would agree with that. Like, I think the Osquery repository's responsibility is to ship binary artifacts, right? I don't think the Osquery repo's responsibility is to ship packaging. I like the distinction. It makes sense to me. And if I start with that distinction, then I almost want to say Osquery should, you know, version its intermediary output. You know, version is a strong word. And that the packaging repo knows what it can consume. And that creates a potentially weird thing where, like, that feels correct to me, but I feel like it's also a little backwards from how many users will end up working with this if they ever actually touch this, right? Because they'll say, oh, well, I've started with Osquery 4.0.0, and now I need to package it. How do I do that? And, you know, if the packaging repository's head expects a different format, it's a little bit weird. So I mean, maybe I just feel like the Osquery, if I say all of that, it almost sounds like, we have an intermediary format, which should be versioned, even if the version's implicit. And the packaging repo needs to know what versions it can consume. And if you're using a build where you're producing a version that cannot be consumed by the packaging repo, then you have to like go and monkey your own, tool chain to do the right thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. But I would still try to tie things as closely as possible, just to make the CI reproducible. I mean, it kind of makes sense to have Semver to handle this case.
Yeah.
However, I'm looking at the practical application of this. I don't think we would ever end up trying to mix different versions.
I mean, we sort of will, maybe. I don't know. I think we're going to set ourselves up for sort of, I guess what I'm worried about is I'm worried about making changes in the packaging repo and needing to go back and add them to Osquery and having it kind of just result in, I don't know, like weird circular dependencies, right? Like if we're like, okay, we've cut 5.0 and now in building it, we've discovered that we have to update something in the packaging repo, right? We forgot to commit a new version number in the packaging repo. So we commit a version number in the packaging repo. And suddenly we can't actually build it because the Osquery thing is locked to the wrong version. So we have to bump Osquery, and now we're no longer building the 5.0 tag. We're now building like 5.0 plus 1. So I'm just, something feels too circular. Like I think I'm very worried about it.
There is no dependency between Osquery and Osquery packaging, but it is true for the opposite direction. The idea is that the Osquery repository can specify a version and a revision to Osquery packaging when building things. So I think we would have, if you really want to track things that way, yeah, that kind of suck. We would have to do a new tag if we want to keep them always pointing to the top Osquery tag.
Also, but if Osquery has a submodule that tells it what version of the packaging repo to use, what's the process for making a change in the packaging repo?
It's mostly what you have described. So you attempt to create a package, and if you're happy with it, then you just commit the submodule and then push it on the Osquery repo. Then if you later discover that you want to package things in a different way that is not supported, then yeah, you will of course have to create another tag if you want to track it somehow.
Yeah,
so you will have to update Osquery packaging, then make a pull request in Osquery.
And I guess that has the advantage that anyone who checks out Osquery version 4.8.0 is always going to get the same version of the packaging code.
Yeah, but the idea was also being able to. So we don't really change too much what kind of files and how many files we ship from Osquery. It wouldn't be too weird, I think, to have some code in Osquery packaging decide what to do based on the artifacts that are present. And speaking about the Semver thing you have mentioned.
Okay, so I guess maybe the question is, what side are we approaching this from? Are we approaching this from the packaging side, wanting to know what it can build reasonably, or are we approaching it from from some future person wanting to attempt to have a reproducible Osquery package? Because I think you're right that if the perspective is we want a reproducible Osquery package, then there should be something like a submodule or whatever equivalent. I don't know. I say we kick this forward. I feel like
Well, I think that the Osquery version that we are following with the Osquery tag is the basic artifact we have, the intermediate format we have. And if we apply this logic here, it means that maybe the packaging code is not as important and we can change it if we need, without having to retag things.
Mm-hmm.
If that is an issue.
We'll probably see, I guess.
But yeah, it kind of feels backward in this case. I see what you mean. It's mostly due to the requirement to do the code signing how we want.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'd toss up a draft PR, or you could throw an issue into the 5.0 milestone or something, and then we'll hopefully not just kick it forward. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I want to sleep on it or something, or even just try playing with what we have now and seeing where we can get with it. Relatedly, our next agenda item is code sign update. So I don't know if there's much to talk about here.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a small status update of sorts. There's a PR up on the private repo. It works. It does what it's supposed to do. It code signs. It doesn't notarize yet because we do not have those secrets up in the repository, but there's a little bit of to-do item there. And yeah, this depends on Alessandra's current 7059 PR. And I've updated it to grab the entitlements file from package data. And I've done a little bit of hardening around creating keychains and like temporary folders and deleting everything after we're done. Yeah, I think that's about it. Notarization is pending. I'll need your help, Seth. And yeah, once the packaging PR is merged, this should work. The upload artifacts, the last bit, that produces a little bit of an error. It just disconnects while talking to GitHub API, but that might be just, GitHub API related issue. I haven't dug into it yet.
No, incrementals look good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and re-review this, and I don't know if it looks good. We can merge it.
Cool.
Nothing uses this, so it's easy to, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time.
Yeah.
So thanks for taking on all the keychain shenanigans.
Yeah.
So Teddy tossed a question into Slack, which I will simply read aloud, which is, I have a refactor of the iNotify events publisher that could use more love, but would address the expectations people have, like knowing when new files are added or replaced. Does anyone have interest in taking this over?
Is it up already?
I don't think so. I suppose it was mainly asking if there's anyone, ready to take the code and move it forward. But yeah, I don't see it.
I don't see it either.
Maybe he can push it in a branch in the Osquery repository so we can contribute.
Kind of wonder if he's pushed it into his fork.
Oh, doesn't look like it.
Okay. He has a lot of branches in his fork.
1,000 up branches, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's everything I had on the agenda. I don't know if other people have anything they want to talk about. Nice to see you, Nick. I don't know if you've got anything.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Nick.
Hey. No, I don't have anything in particular. I just wanted to come and see what y'all are talking about.
I was looking at the ARM channel, and if they provide some kind of example for code build, then maybe we can help out.
I set up a code build POC way back a couple months ago. I should just revisit all that. It was pretty straightforward. I got the build running without too much trouble, and I bailed out on the tests, mostly just because it was a simple POC.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question. Oh, maybe I haven't dug into this at all. The GitHub workflow. Sorry, I'm pulling it up on my screen so I can actually look at it. A lot of things are running in Docker, right?
Yeah.
Like
Linux mainly, just Linux.
Yeah, just Linux. What? Okay, never mind. No, what are we doing? Sorry, I'm totally unprepared for this, but we had a few minutes and we're all here. So the thing I'm trying to remember, do the tests run inside Docker?
Yeah, everything runs inside Docker on Linux. Yep.
So if the tests run inside Docker, are we running them on multiple platforms?
We only have one, which
yeah.
is Ubuntu 18, I think.
Okay, so we don't run the tests on other platforms.
Nope.
That's what I was trying to remember. Thank you. I was just being silly.
I mean, okay, wait. Platforms like Linux distributions.
Distributions.
Like
thank you.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
Do you feel we are going to get further help from AWS?
Sorry, what?
Do you think that the engineers at Amazon are going to help out with this effort?
I think if we want them to.
We're happy with GitHub.
I think that if we want them to, they would probably help us, yes. I think both I and them are quite disappointed in the GitHub APIs and runner functionality. But none of us work for GitHub. So, yeah.
Yeah, for the record, it was mentioned that the manual approval would fix the issues we had with GitHub Actions, but
I don't think so. I think that was a question from a non-Amazon person who was like, "Will this solve this problem?" And then some people maybe jumped and assumed it would, but I don't think it solves the threat case that I'm worried about. So GitHub just announced a couple of things. So GitHub is talking about how basically drive-by cryptocurrency miners are a big problem for workflows, right? Like someone will just PR something up that launches a bunch of crypto miners and they hope they get lucky. So GitHub has announced a couple of things to help with that. One of them is that GitHub won't run a workflow from a new contributor unless it has been signed off on, which is a little bit like the very old Osquery OK to test implementation, which predates my involvement in Osquery, I think. But that's not a good solution, given that that OK to test only applies to the first time a new contributor contributes. That won't really do anything if you're worried about any kind of targeted or sort of anything other than a very casual attack. And the fundamental problem we saw trying to get self-hosted runners to work is there's no way to ensure a clean state at the start of a test run. They just don't support that. Their whole model for the self-hosted runners is non-ephemeral, long-lived runners that are running inside your private GitHub thing for your private GitHub things. And there's like little pieces of it that like clearly there is functionality around ephemerality, but it's not supported. And like all of their engineers are like, don't do it. It's gonna break. It's gonna break. And like just playing around, you're like, okay, I see how I could kind of fake it, and I can see where the race conditions are. And like, do I want to sit here and try and plaster over race conditions that GitHub is like intentionally not fixing? So.
But is the runner marked as stable, or is it some kind of beta testing thing?
Is which?
The runner we use, the
the runners are stable, but they don't. GitHub is very clear that you should not use them for public projects that accept unvetted PRs. GitHub is very much in the like, these are only for secure internal use only. We support zero ephemerality. These things will get secrets. These things will get code. So it's a very different model than like GitLab uses, and then also very different than I think what GitHub runs internally. So internally, their runners are like, let's give GitHub the benefit of the doubt and assume that they have some amount of reasonable ephemerality on the internal runners. But they don't. I'm pretty sure they do. Like they talk about it. I haven't gone testing it and looking for holes yet, but certainly their docs about how they mint credentials is reasonable. Like the core of the problem is that there's no way to, okay, so the way GitHub hosted runners work, as documented, I haven't gone poking the edges or anything, is that a GitHub server will mint a set of credentials, hand them to the runner, or will then start up a runner machine with those credentials. A runner will launch, the runner will fetch a job, do its thing, and then die. And the server knows that this runner will only take one job, so it only gives it one job. All of the things to implement that on a self-hosted runner aren't really there. Like you can mint credentials, cool. You could write a service to mint credentials, cool. You could write a service to mint credentials and then spin up a worker. That's pretty easy. But there's no way to ensure that a worker only gets one job. They just didn't implement it. Like the workers have a -- once command line flag, which is apparently stale and dates to the Azure code, but isn't actually supported on the GitHub code and like might work, but it might also, the server gets confused. So like they're like, don't use this. How did you ever find this? Don't use it. Like this is their comment in one of these PRs, one of these issues. They're like, whoa, how did you find that? Don't use it, doesn't work. With like a lot of hand waving. And there's like a 1.5 year old PR from a GitHub engineer to create ephemeral runners, which never merged. So it's like someone actually clearly did all the work to create ephemeral runners, that would run once and then be destroyed, which is exactly what we and anyone running open source software wants. But the server-side support is missing for that. So there's some comments in there about how, you can't use ephemeral runners until the server understands that your runners might be ephemeral. Otherwise, the server will basically potentially queue jobs for your workers that are then gone. So there's this PR that's hanging out that just never merged and probably never will. So like clearly they don't want this functionality because they would have done it already. So either we try and bludgeon it, which we can probably do. We're smart, but it feels like it doesn't feel like a good game of like trying to make it work the way they clearly don't want it to work. Or we use another tool. And I'm kind of sad. I feel very annoyed. I feel like this is something that is obvious and should be supported, but somehow is not. But I don't know, pragmatically, it seems better to just slink off with my tail between my legs and just run it on Amazon for the ARM64 platform.
Yeah, I agree. At least we have something that is supported and stable.
Yeah. I have actually a question about the packaging code. Can we run the packaging code on an x86 machine to package ARM64 packages?
I think so, yeah.
Cool. I mean, because then that would be helpful, right? We could talk about making the packaging follow that flow.
Yeah, I don't know if it is currently supported. We may have to try this out. However, since we're not compiling anything, I think we should find a way to make it work.
Okay, we can play around. We could also, so one of the other things that the Amazon engineers I was working with, that they focused on a lot, which I think it probably is close to your heart as well, Alessandro, is they talked about, they were just like fundamentally unhappy that the workflow code, so the code that defined what CI did, could not be separated from the repository. They were just deeply annoyed about the security implications of having those two live in the same privileged domain. So they were very displeased. They were like, they just felt totally uncomfortable. They were like, it's way too easy for someone to PR something into changing how the workflow works. Like we want a stronger separation of concerns, and that feels a lot like what Alessandro is doing with the Osquery packaging code too. So it seems maybe a little bit overstated, but I know where they're coming from, so I kind of agree. I wonder if we'd ever want to move more of our things to the Amazon pipeline instead of the GitHub pipeline. We can kind of iterate. We don't have to decide now.
Do you happen to know what's the model under we're going to operate with Amazon? Do we get credits that we have to renew manually? Do they have an open source initiative we can use?
I don't really know. They're happy to give us credits, and I imagine they are happy to give us credits in the future. And that seems to be on a we ask them and they say, okay. They have a couple of open source initiatives that boil down to establish patterns to ask for credits through, but I don't think they have anything equivalent to GitHub or Apple where we just have a thing that kind of works without us having to ask for it. So I think probably we stay on top of it and ask them. They did chuck a huge number of credits at us recently, which is nice because now this no longer hits my credit cards.
Yeah.
Do those current credits expire at some time?
I believe they're probably good for a year.
Okay.
Yeah, I had the same experience with my credits.
Yeah, they expire after a year.
Which I assume is just an accounting, you don't want to carry balance on the books forever.
Maybe the only thing, not really against it, but well, I do have, I'm the first one that has some gripes with GitHub Actions on other topics, especially when you are with your own fork, because you want to prepare a feature branch and then make a pull request on the upstream repository, where it is currently difficult to have that feature branch be built by the CI on your fork repository. And though this makes me remember that if we move everything to Amazon, then for contributors, there's no way to test it beforehand in a CI environment, which is the same that Osquery uses, unless they open the PR immediately and start committing, making a bit of noise maybe on those branches. I don't know. At least for me, I really like to have a separate fork repo where I can test everything I want, and then I can present something that I know 99% should already pass without having upstream CI running too many times.
It's very kind.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean,
I don't have a good answer.
it's also useful, but yeah, that's the only thing.
I know it. Yeah, I don't know. I think the obvious short term is we're not going to move much out of GitHub, right? It's going to sit there with exactly the way it is, and we're going to set up ARM builds inside Amazon by some webhook thing, and then we'll be like, well, this is good enough. Okay, it's good enough, and maybe we could talk about moving packaging, but I feel like I don't really want to move the main builds for a lot of the reasons you say. And it's kind of what we're used to. So I don't know, unless we really fall in love with the Amazon's code build pipeline, I don't really want to do the work to move everything. So I don't know, we'll see.
Oh, well, sorry, this will end it, but another thing is, yes, I could work on the upstream CI, but then it's also the number of the limit of the number of jobs, and if there are multiple contributors, then we are fighting each other, and everyone is also taking double, triple time and testing things. So, well, yeah.
Quick question. Have you tried like a private fork, which is not technically a fork, but a copy, and that will give you your own GitHub CI workflow? I don't know.
Oh, so the problem is more around how the workflow file specify that the trigger events. So since we have our repository and our workflow files say that we can only CI will only start on push on master, what I normally expect to do is just on my fork repo to just create a new branch based on master, and then have a way to tell, please run on that branch. This is not possible as it is, because the master workflow says that push events, CI run on push events, but only on master, so not on my
Should we just
branch.
change that? We could just change that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's a way we can add for instance, the workflow dispatch. We write workflow _ dispatch, and that permits you to select any branch to manually run, which is still fine.
But even more, like, I don't think that master restriction is important. Like, I think that was there because we just wrote, like, I don't think that's considered. I think we just put it there because, we're like, oh, this is what other people do. Let's try it. I don't think it's well reasoned.
I think, well, not to say, well, the thing is that master is protected, and you can only push to it only through a PR.
Well, I guess
you can create a branches. I mean, you do have to have commit access, obviously, but you can create branches more liberally.
I think we protect all the branches. I don't think you can create arbitrary branches. I might be wrong. But I'd also say there's no reason we need to protect CI from other branches. We need to protect packaging and secrets. But CI itself doesn't really use any secrets. So, there's like a split here between, like, I would want to run CI I would be happy to run CI on all branches, and I would be happy to run something that pushed only master builds to an intermediary holding area that was then picked up by packaging, right? If you imagine like a nightly bucket or something, right? I would only want to push nightly things out of master, but I would be happy to run CI on any branch.
Yeah, I'm thinking there is something you can do, because another branch might.
See you, Mike.
See you, Mike. Another branch might still have, since it's from the Osquery repo, might still have access to push artifacts where it shouldn't. Although again, obviously branches come from us, but yeah.
Yeah, we could think about it. Like some of this is, if you could push, like, at the end of the day, I try not to worry too much about people who are allowed to push code to the Osquery org, right? To some level, we're trusting the Osquery committer. So if they push code that like overwrites the workflow file and extracts secrets, like maybe we shouldn't have given them that access. Anyhow, we're at 2. I should probably go 2. Any other comments? We could keep talking about this, I guess. If not, maybe we call it.
Right. Bye all.
Thank you all for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.